One of my favorite drinks, a nice cup of tea. And that, my friends, is our subject here today on Viking.TV. We're talking tea, but there's more to it than that. We will also be talking about a family and a forward-thinking business model that puts words like sustainability, ethics, and community front and central. It's a story of one man's dream that went from small beginnings to become an international brand selling in over 100 countries. So viewers, let me take you on a journey all the way over to Sri Lanka, where we will meet Dilhan and Malik Fernando from the Dilmah Tea company. Dilhan and Malik, welcome to In Conversation.
Thrilled to be with you. Thank you.
It's good to have Alastair. It's good to have you. Gentlemen, could I begin by asking you to introduce yourselves and telling us what you do? Dilhan, maybe you could start.
I'm Dilhan Fernando, the younger son of Merrill Fernando. My passion is tea, and as my father wanted, I focus on certain parts of the business in tea. So we have a union where my brother's passion is tea-inspired hospitality. And so I focus on the tea, and I think he's going to tell you in a minute what he focuses on.
Malik.
So Alastair, when my father created the brand, he named it after my brother Dilhan and myself, Malik. So it's almost like we have a third sibling in the family. And I fell in love. I call myself an accidental hotelier. So my brother and I were both in the core tea business for about almost 30 years. And then I fell in love with hospitality in the tea country, which was our first boutique lodge. And since then, we've opened several others. So we work hand in glove and to continue my father's legacy.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Before we talk about anything else, though, I just want to pass on to you my sincere condolences for the loss of your father, Merrill J. Fernando, the founder of Dilmah Tea, who sadly died just a few weeks ago at the age of 93. And from everything I've read about him, he seems to be a really lovely man, a remarkable man, but also a disruptor who changed the whole model of tea production, a tea pioneer.
Very much so. And his greatness was very much in his kindness, because he defined a new way of doing business. And when in 1950 he started, there were no Sri Lankans. In fact, there were no growers or producers in tea, in coffee or cocoa that had ever ventured into branding. Now, branding is important because that's the more lucrative, remunerative part of the business. And so when in 1985, eventually my father launched in September 1985, it was after 35 years of quite intense effort. And it was the first time that a producer had brought their produce direct to market. Significant for tea, because with tea, freshness is very critical. It's important for taste, of course, and diversity of taste, different terroirs and so on. But it's also important for the natural antioxidant goodness that heals and protects in tea. So my father's philosophy was of serving humanity by integrating family values into our business. And so very much like the Viking business, he practiced this through the MJF Charitable Foundation and Dilmah Conservation, which annually we have 300 people in the field helping women with difficult situations, children, youth with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, schools, hospitals. There's a lot of things. And for my brother and I, there can be no greater privilege now at this difficult point than to steward that incredible legacy.
Well, Dilhan, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here because I want to drill down into some of the topics that you just mentioned. But before we do that, we have a little short video which I think will give viewers an idea of the kind of man your father was.
I was born into a simple rural family. The influence of my parents, especially my mother, and my faith in God molded my character. The primary lessons I learned are humility, kindness and honesty. That is why I made my Dilmah a business that serves humanity, not for profit, but for a better future. I was 20 years old when I started my life in tea. And I cannot quite comprehend how my love for tea has impacted so many lives. It is wonderful to know that so many around the world enjoy my Dilmah tea. Beyond that is the joy I have in knowing that together, my family, my team, and I have been blessed by God to positively impact the lives of thousands.
There we go. He just has such a lovely face. He's just a gorgeous looking man. Before he created his company, your father, he went to London as a young man and he trained as a tea taster. And while he was there, he saw that tea from different sources was blended but marketed as pure Ceylon tea. And maybe at this point, I should just, to avoid any confusion, I should just make it clear that Ceylon and Sri Lanka are the same place. The name changed in 1972.
72.
When Sri Lanka became a republic. But am I correct in thinking that tea production at that time was very much a colonial affair, mostly controlled by big multinationals, and your father changed that?
Very much
They
so.
were operated by
So very much so. And in fact, at that time, Sri Lankans weren't even permitted to taste tea, officially at least, because it was said that we ate too much curry to be able to understand the subtleties of tea tasting. But of course, the colonial administration and the people who were here at the time were protecting their jobs, naturally. But then eventually my father was one amongst 6 of the first tea tasters who were permitted into the then center of the tea trade, which was in Mincing Lane. So he went across to Cannon Street in London, and he worked there with a company called Joseph Travers. He learned the art of tasting, but also saw the terrible mixing and blending of tea. You know, multi-origin blending started out as a practice that would tailor the tea to water in a particular area, but then evolved, unfortunately, probably in the 60s, to a practice that was more about cost reduction and optimizing profit. So my father didn't subscribe to that, and hence the birth of his vision of Ceylon finest tea, picked, perfected, packed at source, unblended, and garden fresh.
Just out of interest,
We had, if I could just add that although we had political independence in 1948, we didn't have economic independence, and that is what my father understood. So that when he went to the UK, 10, 20 years after independence, the economy was still very much controlled. London was the global tea center. So that's what he set successfully to change in the decades that followed.
but I'm guessing he must have made a lot of enemies on the way, didn't he? I mean, if you're a disruptor, not everyone's going to be happy about it.
Locally and overseas, because funnily enough, even in Sri Lanka, many Ceylonese, we still sell our tea as Ceylon tea, because that was the brand that was established over the last, since the 1920s. Many Ceylonese or Sri Lankans were upset with him, saying, our role is to grow tea. Blending, branding, packaging is the role of London or foreign brands. So he had as many enemies locally as he did overseas in terms of the other foreign brands. So it was really a story of courage, how we fought through.
Absolutely remarkable. Yeah, but this is maybe a good point. Can you just give us an idea of how important tea production is to Sri Lanka?
Tea is, its importance is emphasized, underlined by the economic crisis that we recently came out of. So whilst the crop is technically our second most significant national export, what is important is the value addition, because it's entirely grown packed, perfected in Sri Lanka. And so its economic significance is probably enhanced by its social impact, because here we have over 2 million people who directly rely on the tea industry, and possibly 1 million more in the packaging and ancillary industries. And so for Sri Lanka and my father's mission, the significance was the fact that here is an industry that sustains a nation in a very genuine sense, because the revenues from Ceylon tea are what help us to develop. Revenues are what help us to build homes for the plantation workers, healthcare, etc. And so in the absence of a structured economic system that recognized that, my father set up one of his own. So a minimum 15% of our pre-tax earnings are used for constructing hospitals, schools, and so on. But for Sri Lanka, from a national context, that is particularly significant. And what is significant again about my father's vision there was that supplying in bulk gives you a few rupees per kilo, maybe 1 or 2% markup at most, which doesn't really move the needle when it comes to what a producer needs to do. We are at the forefront of climate action. We are at the forefront of migration, urban migration. We are at the forefront of everything, whether it is COVID or other social and gender inequalities. So all of these need sustainable business model, and I think that's what my father's philosophy represents for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, there are also parallels, Alastair, with cocoa, coffee, and chocolate. So if you look at coffee, which is obviously has been a booming industry for decades, the model is the beans from where it's grown comes into Europe or the US. The roasting, value addition happens in consuming countries. The same with chocolate. All the chocolate brands, all the chocolates you buy, there are a few small exceptions. There's very little money that goes back to the producer. So in the case of tea, my father was, I think, absolutely the pioneer, and I don't think it's been done to such a significant level in any other industry where a producer has, come directly to market.
No, your father, he was very percipient in his ideas and his thinking. And when I read about Dilmah Tea, I see a lot of the same values being expressed as are by Viking. And I'm talking about things like staying true to one's heritage and caring for the workforce and their communities and respecting the environment. I just wonder, could you talk a little bit more about how these values actually translate into everyday life?
I'll give you an example. Here, part of my job in tea, my brother's job in leisure, is that as we head our respective areas, we have to pay equal consideration to the implementation of my father's philosophy of kindness. So one example, if we were today to take our tea and adopt the blending model, which my father fought against, which he put into the foundation of our business, that unblended, we could probably triple our profits, but we would be going against his philosophy. Not probably, we could definitely triple our profits because the cost would be so much lower, but we would be violating the covenant that he built with the consumer by saying, look, a consumer has a right to know exactly where the tea he or she is buying comes from. Its entire story. I mean, it was a traceability argument long before traceability came into vogue. So every one of our packs clearly states this is what it is. It has a signature, and as my brother said, it has our names, Dilhan and Malik, of course, merged. But and with that comes a responsibility. So my father insists that there is an uncompromising commitment to the principles of taste. So taste, just literally 50 meters from where I'm sitting, we taste 10,000 teas every week. Every single tea that is produced in Sri Lanka, just to select English breakfast with the right characteristics, the woody note, the intensity, the Irish breakfast with the earthiness, and so on and so forth. So emphasis on taste, but also emphasis on goodness. Goodness means tea has to be fresh. So if we were to, for example, play a forward market and say, okay, look, prices are low now, let's buy enough tea for the year, we could double our profits again. But that's outside the founder's philosophy. So we buy. So when a customer places an order, we have an ERP system which sends your order out, and the tea is picked. It's perfected. It's packed garden fresh. So within weeks, it's on shelf. And that's simply because taste is related to freshness. Antioxidant goodness is related to freshness. And the third part of it is the purpose. So it's taste, goodness, and purpose. Purpose is what defines our actions. If we do anything, if we are considering any project that might impact negatively environment, vulnerable species, have a negative impact on the social aspect of any community, it is not on. And today, in this day and age, the cost of ensuring that you're compliant with that kindness principle is very, very significant. We are today probably the single largest private funded foundation in the region. And that is because of that commitment and, going into a community, you have to give back as much as you take out. So building the schools, building the hospitals, building the care community and the entrepreneurship and so on. But in a way, I mean, it's tough, but it's beautiful in its clarity because you know that you have no option other than to do what is right. And for us, that gives great clarity and really tremendous motivation.
Also, when you're a family business, you're not looking at it from a share market, quarterly returns, and so on. You're doing what is good for the business as well as for the community at large. So I think the absence of those pressures, where you just focus on doing the best thing without any window dressing, I think has a huge benefit. And for management, I think it's a real relief that you're not simply looking at something which looks good in the short term. Anything a family business does, you're looking at the long term.
No, I think that's wonderful, and I really applaud the values that your father has put into the company. Well, I mean, they're the kind of values that you could almost translate into a political career. Was he ever tempted to go into politics? Because I mean, he certainly looks the part. I'd vote for him just on the way he looks.
He has a wonderful smile, or had a wonderful smile, and he was kind to everyone. And he was the kind of man who would be perhaps in conversation with the president of a country, and then a tea picker would walk by, a worker, and would greet him, and he would take a moment to greet that person. So he was very, very down to earth. No, he wasn't. He was disgusted by politics, frankly, and he had a lot of politician friends who used to advise. No, I don't think he would ever consider it, nor would he, be happy at all if my brother and I or our family got involved. We've got to focus on doing good through the business.
Yeah, and business as part of a community, which I think is just really great. Just to illustrate that, we got a little video coming up. Let's take a look at it.
I could never imagine a world where inequality would be so pronounced. My greatest pleasure and privilege are the work of the MJF Charitable Foundation. It has shown me what our world could be. I cannot understand why every business cannot be built around kindness. It would make the people that run them and their customers happier. We have children of tea pickers who are lawyers, judges, doctors, architects, chefs, and prominent in other professions. Children and youth with development disorders cared for and nurtured. Thousands of aspiring rural entrepreneurs helped in realizing their dreams. This is the significance that every successful business should endeavor to aspire. Profit is temporary. It can never replace the fulfillment of changing someone's life.
Yep, here. I applaud all of that. Yeah, it must be very moving for you to watch those videos, is it?
It is, because we can remember, for my father, it wasn't just in making the video. I mean, you can see, I remember the day that he made that. He was walking outside my house, and we had somebody, and he was asked if he would like to make a statement for an update of our videos, and he said, yes, let's do it right now, get the camera. And the next thing is, and he was as simple as that. As you can see, he's completely inappropriately attired. He just had Sunday lunch, and he was walking outside my house, and his greatness was always in his simplicity and his humility. And I think that is what echoes our attitude to our business. You've got to keep it real. Often in businesses, we get a little ahead of ourselves, or begin to think of ourselves as something much greater than we are. My father saw business as simply a means of aligning his passion for tea with his desire to serve humanity. Of course, it was reinforced by his very strong, almost invincible faith, and his relentless determination to do what is right. So that delivered the outcomes which we see. I mean, every year, almost 120,000 people whose lives are touched in some way. And ironically, of course, this is slightly oddly, but at his funeral, the kind of people who came, of course, we had president and prime minister and speaker and ministers, but for him, what would have been most important was the thousands of people whose lives had been touched by him. There was one in the church. There was a little boy. He must have been 11 or 12. He just came with a single flower. It was so poignant. It was, and I didn't talk to the boy, but I was wondering, what was it? He wasn't with his parents. He was on his own. And what was it about my father that had touched his life? And that was the power of this philosophy. And I don't say the power of the man. It was, he always gave glory to God for his beliefs and what he had. His philosophy is something that is so very relevant to the challenges we have in this day and age. If you look at how we need to strengthen the rural economy, how we need to make sure that what we eat and drink is of the best quality in terms of its safety, also the understanding that in the case of tea, it helps with cognitive ability, with mental health, with helping us to be calmer, and I mean, there's L-theanine in tea that actually scientifically proven to do that. So all of that, I think the beauty was in his simplicity.
Malik, tell me a little bit about your company's relationship with Viking. How did that begin?
So, long way back. I was at school with Kareem, and my brother and I both studied in the United Kingdom at a Jesuit boarding school. And after our A-levels, my brother went on to university in the UK, and I thought I'll try the US. So I ended up in Boston at a business school called Babson, and just across the way was Wellesley College, where Kareem was. So we were both freshmen. And I had a very close Sri Lankan family friend who I went to visit, and they were roommates. So, I used to hang out there 7 days a week, and, college was a very relaxed time, and I just don't know how we did any work at all. But I think Kareem was reasonably diligent, as I recall. But so we used to just spend several evenings just shooting the breeze and talking about all kinds of stuff in a very United Nations fashion. Norwegian, and 2 Sri Lankans, actually. So they were roommates, and then we kept in touch throughout. So we were together for, I think, 4 years, and then visiting her in the UK and so on. And I just remember her sort of wonderful, beaming smile. That was Kareem for me. And then we lost touch, and then reconnected a few years ago, because my father, and this is interesting and relevant, the Nobel laureates in peace and economics, they had this award called Business for Peace, which is awarded every year. It started 15 years ago. So in 2015, my father received this award in the Oslo town hall. And it was the 6th of May, 2015. It was also his birthday. And it was the Crown Prince of Norway, of the king who was in the audience. And he mentioned that it was his birthday, and all these 1,000 people in the town hall, including, I think it was His Majesty King or Prince Hakan, I think Hakan, they all stood up and sang happy birthday to him. He was so touched. He said that was the most memorable day of his life. And this is the hall where I think President Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize. So around that time, I reconnected with Karine, and she came across to the hotel where we were staying with iconic dog Finster. And I don't think she goes anywhere without Finster. And we just hung out and we reconnected. And that's how things came back full circle from the late 1980s to the reason we're having this program today, and your Viking guests can taste Dilmah Tea whenever they're in the Winter Garden.
Exactly. Well, anyone watching who's ever sailed with Viking on an ocean cruise will almost certainly have enjoyed the tea time experience in the Winter Garden.
Nice cucumber sandwiches. And, something really amazing about tea, unlike coffee, is that particularly if you drink it without milk, it's a wonderful palate cleanser between, different courses or different bites. So it really enhances the flavor of whatever you're eating. It is astringency. That is an amazing feature of tea.
Gentlemen, as I said in my introduction, the company has grown enormously from its early days and become very successful. But I'm curious to know, how is it working together as brothers? Do you disagree a lot now that your father's no longer here to keep you in order?
No, he's really awful, but don't tell him that.
No, he set a very clear agenda, and he formed a charter, which fortunately he started discussing with us a while ago. But I must say that also he was very emphatic in his direction. So from the time that we started, so whatever disputes we were going to have, we probably had along the way, because eventually, for my father, like I said a little while ago, it was only the right way. You could only do that. So if it was to be a certain tea, regardless of whatever anybody else is offering in tea, his breakfast tea has to be the original recipe, has to be from this estate. The cost might be 10 times more, but there's no way you change, and, he used to tell me sometimes, look, you make a profit if you can, but, if you must, you lose, because quality doesn't change. There's no compromise on taste, on goodness, and on purpose. And, for us, particularly at this time in Sri Lanka's history, that's a blessing, because this year, for example, $1 billion rupees has been from Dilmah has gone towards some of the causes that are so severely underfunded. Children with disability, developmental disorders, women in difficult situations in the former conflict-affected areas. And so for us to be able to offer the tea and fulfill my father's philosophy by doing good, I think, on that, there really can be no dispute. We are absolutely, because that is humanity. That is what every person in business, I guess, aspires to, if they're permitted to. So,
see, Alastair, when my father lived till 93. So we've been working with him for more than 30 years. And I think one of the key things which kind of, made him overjoyed is that my brother and I have inculcated all his passion. So we are equally passionate about tea, about Dilmah, family business, and in my case, belatedly about tourism, because there is a very close synergy between tea and tourism, and there are two staple economic activities in Sri Lanka. So my father used to always say, tea and tourism have a very high level of value addition. It's not like you're importing something, adding a bit of value and exporting it. So I think when you share the passion, you share the vision, irrespective of any documentation and all of that, which is also important, it means that, you're aligned, your priorities are aligned. And when I wake up in the morning, it is, what we can do to further my father's mission, which is my brother's first thought as well, I'm sure. So therefore, your answer is not at all, because we think the same, and we have for the last 2 or 3 decades, because you work alongside your father, and there's been total alignment. When I left university in Boston, I was offered a job at McKinsey, which back then was pretty rare, and I just turned it down without even thinking twice and said, I'm going to go back home to help my father and my brother, because I know how he labored to have us educated overseas. So I think that is the biggest safeguard, even for the third generation, our children, that they are aligned and they had the fortune of working alongside their grandfather and imbibing his culture. So I can, for the third generation, I think we're sure fourth onwards, my brother and I have to work at it. My father did all the good work for the second and third generation in terms of aligning with his vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I admit that what I know about tea growing, you could write it on the back of a tea leaf. So just just tell me a little bit about the process. How hard? I mean, I imagine it's a bit like wine. You need the right soil, and you need a certain climate, and maybe there's a certain time to harvest. I don't know. Can you tell me a little bit about how easy or hard it is to grow tea?
It's a beautiful process, Alastair, and it begins with hand-picking. And hand-picking, for us, of course, it begins with hand-picking. In most of the world, it is still mechanically harvested. But you can see in that image there that hand-picking is important because it helps you to identify through the human eye, through color, shape, and the height. You can identify which are the youngest and most tender shoots. And that is where you have the concentration of flavor and the natural antioxidants, because the older leaves become a little bit more intense, a little bit more bitter in flavor and taste. And so you need to be sure to pick just the young leaves. And once picked, they've got a very high moisture level. So they go into a process called withering, where through a very natural process that can take anywhere between 6 and 12, 14 hours, depending on ambient conditions, the moisture level would be brought down to around 42%. And at that point, the leaf is ready for the next process. And the crux of it is the rolling process, where the cell walls, in any leaf, you have cells and you have cell sap, the juices within a leaf, where the cell walls are gently broken, and essentially rolling emulates the action 5,000 years ago where Emperor Shen Nung, the father of traditional Chinese medicine, his physicians would go out, take the leaves and roll it between their palms. And the rolling machine today does exactly that. It has batons for the fingers, and it has a wooden base, which is the palm. And so once rolled, you make sure that you have a thing called a roll breaker, where you make sure that the temperature doesn't get too high. You sort of spread out the leaf a little bit. And at the next stage, at the right moment, it goes into fermentation. If it's a black tea, so that's an oxidization process. So at that point, the leaves, which up to this point have an olive green color typically, they go through the process of fermentation, where the antioxidants change from the catechins through to the erubigins, which essentially means they go from green tea antioxidants to black tea. A lot of people don't realize that green and black teas have very similar antioxidants, goodness, and health benefits. So it's just the antioxidants change and they become something a little different. And then the final stage, at a certain moment, when the tea has evolved in its character and its taste, it becomes, it's ready. The tea maker noses it and says, okay, it's good. It goes into what we call a dryer, or into a firing process, where the tea is dried, all the moisture taken out, and it comes down to around 2% moisture. And what that does essentially is prepare it for going out and locking in all the flavor and the goodness and so on, and preparing the tea to go out and to be consumed on board Viking cruisers.
And can the tea be harvested all year round, or is there a season of?
It is perennial.
Yeah,
it is perennial. But tea very much is exactly like wine. It has the fingerprint of nature, or terroir, which means that when it's raining, you have the metabolic system within the plant is affected to an extent where you have the rain influencing the tea and therefore the tea being a little thin. Whereas like right now, when we have a lack of rain, you have more quality, lower yield, but the sunshine influences the tea, brings out more intensity, more brightness in some cases if it's accompanied by wind, but also brings out intensity. So you have a beautiful synergy of tea leaf and the ambient climatic conditions. So if tea grows under the shade of an eucalyptus tree, you have a certain characteristic. Tea grows in the valley, you have different soils there. You have you have different drainage, but you have more moisture. And therefore the tea is different because the metabolic process and therefore the cell sap is affected. Tea on the top of the mountain, morning sunshine, bright, beautiful wind conditions. It's a magnificent agricultural endeavor.
You sent me some beautiful photos of your tea estates. I mean, they're just gorgeous to look at. And as somebody who loves traveling by train, I really love the shots of, and we'll show them now, of a train going right through the middle of the plantation. And just tell me about that train. Is that a tourist experience, or is that a regular train line?
That's either you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, I'll start again. So basically the infrastructure, we spoke earlier about the importance of tea to Ceylon back then. Our rail system, our road network, to a large extent, banks, insurance companies, all grew on the back of Ceylon tea, which first started in 1867. So the rail line was built from around 1870 to about 1900 to transport the tea from the estates to Colombo, which is the capital city, and then to the harbour to export to London. And it has now become a huge tourist attraction. It is the most scenic train journeys in the world, because it starts at sea level. It goes up to about almost 7,000 feet. That's about 2,500 meters. In fact, the BBC had a program recently. They've got this amazing rail journey of the world, and they featured this train. They stopped at Ceylon Tea Trails, which is the Relais Chateau boutique lodges, where we've converted the tea planters' bungalows on the tea estates to a boutique resort. And they interviewed the tea planting residents who explained all about the history of tea. So that journey is something that's hugely Instagrammable. One of the key reasons people come to Sri Lanka. It takes about 7 hours total, but people can do it in segments. So you can leave Kandy, which is one of the old hill capitals, and then come across. And this is somewhere in the Dikkoya area, not far from Tea Trails, and then get off at Norelia. And then from Norelia, they can go to the eastern hills. And it's slow travel. It's a lot like cruising, which is where you move very slowly. You're not overly hectic. And you can stick your head out of the window. It really is one of the highlights of tourism in Sri Lanka. And it goes right through our tea plantations, very near Ceylon Tea Trails, near where Dilmah Tea is grown. It's quite iconic.
I hate the expression bucket list, but if I had a bucket list, that one day I will take that train journey, because I just love traveling by train.
And you know what it costs, Alastair? It costs about $1.50, maybe $2. That's what it costs. It's not the Orient Express. It's not plush, super luxurious, but it's got amazing views, and great company, and it still is used by Sri Lankans to go up to their estates, to go to their homes on the eastern side of the tea mountain. So it really is a bucket list experience, a very affordable one.
I'll do it one day. One thing we can't ignore, just to get back to being serious for a moment, is climate change, global warming. Tell me, is this a concern for you, and what is your approach to it? How do you think how's it going to affect the tea growing business?
it's a significant concern. Alastair, right now, talking to you from a country that is struggling with drought. But, the thing about climate change is that there are multiple remedial or mitigating aspects. So where the tea industry is concerned, for example, in 2012, we started working with biochar. We refined the use of biochar, which is an ancient Aztec technique of bringing it into the 21st century using certain newer methods to produce it in volume. It's a fantastic climate mitigation measure, but beyond that, there are a multitude of adaptations. And I think this is the point with climate action. Whilst the climate is changing and it is a threat, particularly where extreme weather is concerned, the tea country still has tremendous opportunity to adapt. And we do that using shade trees. You see in the picture behind me, you see the shade trees on Holyrood Estate, but you see also other measures. So under the soil, you have the biochar, which optimizes, even if you have less rainfall, it optimizes it. You impregnate it with certain nutrition, which means that you have much less labor requirement for ongoing fertilizing and so on. So yes, climate is a huge threat, but there are multiple adaptations, and I think most significant is involving people in the process. So one of the key priorities we have is in integrating livelihoods into our biodiversity programs, and biodiversity is also key. Instead of looking at the old model and with apologies for the reference to the British, but at the time it was the known, during the British Empire, it was the best method, and there were no disadvantages seen at the time. But plantation agriculture is a horrible impact on the environment. And so what we focus on is building biodiversity, so looking at diversification, agroforestry, and all of these are techniques where we can mitigate the worst effects of climate change.
Yeah, hopefully that will work out. Yeah, it's a couple of quick fire questions, gentlemen, before we finish. How many cups of tea a day do you drink?
I drink 50. I have a pot permanently on my desk. My brother, I'm not sure.
7, 6 or 7. My office is directly over a company called Forbes and Walker, which is one of our companies, a tea broker. So they deliver me freshly every 40 minutes or so a nice Norelia tea without any milk. Beautiful and crisp.
That's great. That's why that leads me to my next question. There's a big debate about, well, the debate goes like this: if you take milk, should you put the milk in first or last, and should you put milk in at all?
I think the tea that you like best is the tea that is best for you. So our job as tea tasters is to make sure that if you take milk with your tea, make sure it's the right milk. So there are some milks that aren't too good, not coconut, not soy, but maybe oat milk, or of course dairy milk if you're okay with dairy milk. And then you make sure that you have tea that is brewed properly, 3 to 4 minutes with a few stirs. Make sure it's strong so that you have balance. Whatever you add to tea will take away from it. So I can tell you some evenings at home, I use orange peel, use cinnamon, cardamom, clove, mint leaves. It's fantastic. But of course, make sure that you have the tea and your other ingredients in balance, and keep it natural so it's good for you.
What is horrific, and I've seen that too many times, is that people put a tea bag in, they put boiling or hot water and add milk immediately. I've seen that. And you're kind of brewing your tea bag in tepid water with milk. I mean, that is an absolute no-no. If you add a dash of milk, if the tea is strong, and if the tea is being brewed separately and not brewing in the cup, doesn't matter whether you add it first or second, but you most certainly do not brew your tea bag in a milky concoction.
Never let it be said that I've ever done that. No, absolutely not. Oh, I probably did, but I was a student. But no. Anyway, great advice, gentlemen. I think we've probably come to the end of our conversation, but thank you so much for giving me a little tour of Sri Lanka and of your tea estates and of the world of tea, and really just to say how special I think it is that you continue the values that your father handed down to you, and what great values they are. I think it's a real model for how business should be run in the 21st century. So thank you. One more question: have you ever been on a Viking ship?
I think my brother has.
Love to. I would love to. I haven't, but I aspired.
But then,
and that's going to happen.
one thing we're going to do in remembrance of my father is to have an annual Viking cruise. He used to love cruising, so we used to cruise on another brand, which I won't mention since it's a Viking program. But we've decided, my brother and I, that starting from end this year, we will do an annual Viking ocean cruise with his family and mine, because that is what my father would love us to do. So we're hoping to experience it soon.
Having seen the visuals of the new Viking cruises, I can tell you there is nothing we would like better, because it seems to have raised the gold standard to new heights. So we're looking forward to that early next year.
And apparently they've got some great tea on board, Alastair. That's another reason.
I've heard there's some great tea on the ships. Yeah. Only I knew who made it. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.